Do you ever feel like when it rains, it pours? And I'm not talking about salt. You just get your brakes fixed, and then the alternator goes out. You pay off one bill, and two more arrive in the mail. When it rains, it pours. Bad news comes in bunches. Most of you know that I broke my leg a couple months ago and been hobbling around on a broken leg for weeks. It was miserable. But 10 days ago, the doctor said I could take the boot off. I was free. It was wonderful. I could drive again. I could work in the garden again. And I did. For too long. My back went into spasms, and I spent most of this week lying flat on my back. In worse pain than when I broke my leg, and getting even less done. When it rains, it pours. Pastor Bill's sister, Laura, who is undergoing cancer treatment, puts it this way. Some days it just seems like there is nowhere to go, and you're fenced back into a yard of bad news. Are you living in a yard of bad news? Has a little black rain cloud been following you around? Then Mark 5 is for you. Mark chapter 5 has bad news in bunches, but every time, Jesus is there, and there is hope. We start with Jesus sailing across the far side of the Sea of Galilee. They went across the lake to the region of the Gerasenes. When Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an evil spirit came from the tombs to meet him. This man lived in the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain. For he had often been chained hand and foot. But he tore the chains apart and broke the irons on his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day, among the tombs and in the hills, he would cry out and cut himself with stones. This man has it bad. He is out of his mind. He lives among the tombs in the graveyard. His neighbors fear him, and he cuts himself with sharp stones. He's possessed by demons. He has it bad. But maybe you do too. What demons do you wrestle with? Do you feel like you belong with the dead rather than the living? Do you hurt yourself just to feel something? We think of cutting as a new thing that the kids have just started doing, but it's as old as the Bible. This man had no hope, no comfort, until Jesus shows up. When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and fell on his knees in front of him. He shouted at the top of his voice, "What do you have to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? Swear to God that you won't torture me." For Jesus was saying to him, "Come out of this man, you evil spirit." Then Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" "My name is Legion," he replied, "for we are many." And he begged Jesus again and again not to send them out of the area. A large herd of pigs was feeding on a nearby hillside. The demons begged Jesus, "Send us among the pigs. Allow us to go into them." He gave them permission, and the evil spirits came out and went into the pigs. The herd, about 2,000 in number, rushed down the steep bank and into the lake and were drowned. Now, don't get caught up in the pigs. Why did Jesus send the demons to the pigs? Why did they run off the cliff? Those kinds of things. Those are interesting questions, but they're not the most important thing. The most important thing is Jesus showed up, and a broken man is healed. When it rains, it pours, but when Jesus comes, the clouds break and the sun shines, and hope is reborn. Continuing on, those tending the pigs ran off and reported this in the town and countryside, and the people went out to see what had happened. When they came to Jesus, they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons sitting there, dressed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. Those who had seen it told the people what had happened to the demon-possessed man, and told about the pigs as well. Then the people began to plead with Jesus to leave their region. See why I told you not to to get focused on the pigs? That's what the community did. They look at this man now fully clothed and in his right mind, but do they think about him? Do they care that this crazy guy was healed? No, they just think about those 2,000 pigs they lost. Do you know how much money that is? All they can think about is the pigs. And so they beg Jesus to leave. They don't care about the suffering man, but Jesus does. And this story ends with this man praising God and being reunited with his family. As Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. Jesus did not let him, but said, "Go home to your family and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you." And so the man went away and began to tell in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and all the people were amazed. Wow, what a story. This man didn't have a little rain cloud over him. He had a regular gully washer storming onto his life. But he ran to Jesus, and the light of Christ shone through those dark clouds, and he couldn't stop telling everyone what God had done for him. When the dark clouds rain on you, run to Jesus, and you'll find hope, even in the midst of the storm. But that's not the end of Mark 5. Mark 5 continues. Jesus sails across the sea again, and before he can even get off the beach, another man comes running to him. This man is not possessed or even hurt, but his daughter is gravely ill. Verse 21. When Jesus had again crossed over by boat to the other side of the lake, a large crowd gathered around him. While he was by the lake, one of the synagogue rulers named Jairus came. Seeing Jesus, he fell at his feet and pleaded earnestly with him, "My little daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her so that she'll be healed and live." And so Jesus went with him. Those of you who are parents know that it's often harder to have one of your kids sick than for you to be sick. Sometimes you'd do anything to be able to take their pain away. You'd gladly bear it, if only they didn't have to suffer. But it doesn't work that way, does it? And like on the other side of the lake, you cry out in anguish, this time for your child. And as on the other side of the sea, Jesus comes and he walks with you. "My daughter is dying," says Jairus. "Please come." And so Jesus went. But along the way, he runs into another person in trouble. See, when it rains, it pours. A large crowd followed and pressed around him, and a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all she had, yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, because she thought, "If I just touch his clothes, I'll be healed." Immediately her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. At once Jesus realized that power had gone out from him. He turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my clothes?" "You see the people crowding around you," his disciples answered, "and yet you can ask, 'Who touched me?'" But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. Then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, and trembling with fear told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." Once again, Jesus meets someone who has a rain cloud over their life. "I've been bummed out because I've been hurting for 2 months, but this woman has been bleeding for 12 years. Can you imagine her suffering? And in Jewish law, bleeding meant that she was unclean, so she couldn't be around people, couldn't go to worship, couldn't take part in family events. I at least could hobble around here, but she couldn't come for 12 years. And she had no medical insurance. All of her savings had gone to pay doctor's bills. Maybe you can relate to that. How awful.